Former Airbnb employee Danny Rusteen gives his real and raw reaction to the interview done with Brian Chesky and Diary of a CEO right here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Hey, I need to take a really quick break from this podcast. And if you are a loyal listener of the Fearless Investor Podcast, you're probably either a business owner or looking to start a business. And for that reason, you need to make sure you're doing things correctly, down to the T. From forming the correct LLC to bookkeeping to understanding the tax code and more. It's all really the boring stuff, but it can make or break your business. In fact, if you aren't doing it correctly, you could be like 98% of other business professionals in the US and overpay on taxes. Don't do that, guys. Be the 2%. And that's why I rely on Easier Accounting, and so should you. Easier Accounting is a team of tax professionals that will set up your LLC, keep your books, file your taxes, and they can even repair your credit. And just so you know, I myself use Easier Accounting, and this came after using a similar company that, really being blunt here, completely ripped me off. So when I started using Easier Accounting, I came in a little bit skeptical, but as I started talking to them, I could really tell they had my best interests at heart. And you know me, if I'm not a professional, I'm not going to do it myself. I'm going to outsource that stuff. And I hope you will do the same and use that same mindset to hire professionals to help you form and manage your business. Easier Accounting is absolutely the way to go. Go check them out at fearlesskyle.com/easier accounting. Hey, welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. You're listening to me, Kyle Stanley, and I'm really excited. We're just going to jump right into this one because this was actually not where I saw the conversation going, but I kind of took the opportunity and went for it. Danny Rusteen, former Airbnb employee, he has his own book, Optimize Your Airbnb, and he also just released a new book that we are talking about on this show, which is called Profitable Properties. You can get both of those at optimizemyairbnb.com, optimizemyairbnb.com. But Danny and I started talking, and I was like, you know what? I just listened to this podcast with Brian Chesky, and I got some questions because I really would like to know from the eyes of someone that used to work in the actual office next to Brian, next to all the employees, what was it like working at Airbnb, and what about all these changes that have happened? Are you in favor? What you know, all of the things that I know a lot of you are kind of like, I'm kind of curious about that too. So we kind of got into that. We also talk about Danny's book. And also, I just want to make sure that you know Danny gives a really great opportunity for you to get this at 50% off. It's a program that he has at optimizemyairbnb.com. In the upper right-hand corner, it's called the Profitable Properties Program. And if you use the keyword fearless, all capital, keyword fearless, you're going to get a 50% discount on that. So go check it out. But let's get to it with this really fun conversation that we had with Danny Rusteen. Hey guys, welcome in. We have Danny Rusteen, a returning guest, but I got to tell you, Danny, man, it's been like, close to 3.5 years since we had you on the show. I think it was even pre-COVID, which like that's crazy to think. So, first of all, catch us up. How's life? What I know you've written a new book. Just give us a little update on life.
Yeah, since 3.5 years ago, it was pre-COVID. I have been doing similar stuff in terms of travel. I still travel around the world. I stay pretty much 1 month in Airbnbs, even when I'm in my home base is kind of Medellin, where I'm at now.
Okay.
And I'm staying not in I have an Airbnb here, but I'm staying in another Airbnb. So I'm like a permanent Airbnb guest, more than 2,500 nights. Back then it was like around, 1,000 nights or whatever. So I'm doing that. I bought, like I mentioned, an Airbnb in Medellin, which is the first property that piece of real estate that I personally bought. And still my life is very ingrained in Airbnb. I think we spoke prior to Airbnb going public, right? As well.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Well, and I'm curious, with as much as you travel and especially traveling in Airbnbs, what did you do right from like March of 2020 to call it like July of 2020 when everyone was like, oh my gosh, the world is coming to an end. Don't travel, stay in your house. What did you do?
Well, I'm a skeptical person by nature. Okay. So I'll preface all this with that. When I heard about it in January, my dad told me about it, and immediately I was skeptical. And so I was in Vietnam at the time, and they actually took it very
Vietnam.
seriously very quickly.
Wow.
So I was getting temperature scanned going into shopping malls and whatnot very early. I thought at the beginning, I thought it was great because the only thing that happened was there was like no lines. Like that, like I said, they took it seriously. So I went to go do tour, like a touristy thing, go up to the highest building. There was no lines. There was no one in the shopping malls, but everything was open still.
Yeah.
And then I luckily I met someone there who's become a very good friend of mine. We separated in just before, like we separated like March 10th, if you recall. I went to the Philippines, and on March
Yeah.
14th was when the World Health Organization declared it a world pandemic. And so I just arrived in the Philippines. The president on Friday said, "Hey, just I'm gonna chill out for the weekend. I'm gonna make an announcement on Monday." So I'm there on Friday. I arrived there on Friday. Everything's closed on Friday. Everyone's freaking out. On Monday, he announces, "Okay, we're closing the country on Friday." So now I'm in a foreign country, and I'm like, I don't want to stay here. I
Yeah.
was like,
No
what do
kidding.
I do? Now it's getting serious. I have to fix. So I did a bunch of research on where I might want to go, and I decided on going to Bali, which is where that friend was who I met in Vietnam,
Yeah.
and we lived together for 5 months
Holy cow.
during the height of it. And in Bali, I was very how I traveled was very strange. I traveled like ahead of the curve. So Bali, there was no real restrictions. I went to the gym, the grocery store, all that was good. And then I left and I went to Istanbul in August, and also no restrictions. But then, like afterwards, then Bali got restrictions. Then afterwards, then Istanbul got restrictions. Then I went to Brazil for September to December, and there was some restrictions there. And then I went to Colombia in December 2020, and that's when I was looking for what I call the Belmonte penthouse, my Airbnb here, and I stayed in Colombia for a while. So my travel schedule didn't slow down too much, but it did slow down a little bit.
And you sounded like you kind of kept ahead of COVID there for a while. So that's awesome, man. I mean, Bali for 5 months. Most of us just dream of going to Bali for 5 days, and you were there for 5 months. That's awesome. Well, I know we had you on the show back
But
before
wait, actually,
COVID.
I
Yeah.
should say something there because it's relevant to your audience.
Yeah.
I realized something quite profound. I think that at
Okay.
this time, so at Airbnb, I was staying longer term, right, month long in Airbnbs there. They were
Like a
these
lot of people.
gorgeous
Yeah.
houses were discounting. So me and my friend were moving around houses, going up and up and up, getting like nicer houses. And there was this one house that we went into. It had like a 4.98, hundreds of reviews, super positively reviewed. And we're like, we couldn't go and see the house, but because it was busy, but we're like, all right, so we went there. And I realized there that the reason why it was so well reviewed is because people were staying for a night, 2 nights, 3 nights, where certain things aren't that important to them. And as I was staying for a month, that crack in the door, letting in mosquitoes every night, where I'm just trying to chill
Oh,
at
yeah.
night, that
Yeah.
became an issue. The sound on the street, that became an issue. The cookware, which was terrible. There was literal duct tape around the kitchen knife.
Oh,
That
yikes.
became an issue. So all these things that normally I wouldn't care about staying just a couple nights, just kind of an annoyance, became like a kind of a big issue in this house that was highly rated. So if you have short-term guests or long-term guests, those are totally different experiences.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, especially with a lot of people trying to transition to midterm rentals and doing,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
insurance stays and everything. Having everything you need for a long-term stay feels a lot different from a guest perspective than having everything you need for maybe 1 or 2 nights when you're probably not going to go buy groceries, when you're not going to care about the quality of sleep because you're just, passing through for the night. So those are good points, and definitely an evolution in our business for sure.
Yeah, and even more than just like amenities is home features. Like, sometimes if the shower takes like 5 minutes to warm up, yeah, it's just kind of an annoyance if I'm there for a few days. But if I'm there for a month and I gotta wait an extra 5 minutes, like every single time, it's like, oh, this is kind of annoying, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, I feel you, man. I feel you. Well, let's talk uh and just giving people a little bit of a preface of where you came from. I know, we already had you on the show, and typically when I have a repeat guest, I don't like to go over the story again, but it's been so long. So I do want everyone to hear about your background. You actually worked as an employee for Airbnb. Can you just give that background and when that happened, how that came about? A little bit of the story on that?
Yeah, that time was a very interesting time for me. So I went to college for accounting. I got my CPA. I was very traditional in that in the working world, the office world. And I was a public accountant. I quit that job.
Hmm.
And in my pursuit of looking for a new job, I found Airbnb, or rather Airbnb found me. My roommate at the time introduced me to Airbnb. And I got a different job, but I stayed in touch with Airbnb because as soon as I heard the name and what they did, I was like, that just makes sense to me. But this was back in the days where people thought Airbnb sleeping on couches, like what a ridiculous
Yeah.
idea. And so I started there in 2013. It was Airbnb was valued as $10 billion then. It was big, still big company. But the interesting thing is nobody knew about them, not even
Right.
in San Francisco where they were headquartered.
Wow.
So I would get packages delivered to the office, and I'd have to like spell out like AIRBNB because Airbnb. They're like, what? That wasn't a word in our lexicon yet.
Yeah.
So I worked there for a couple of years, and then in accounting, and then I moved to a local operations they called it, which was like basically marketing. And so I got to see that side of it. I got to do a bunch of uh, they loved back then they loved internal hosts, and I was a host actually of the couch in my living room in San Francisco, the same exact way Airbnb got started. I met a bunch
Yeah.
of people all over the world doing that. And so they would send out experiments to the company. Hey, if you're a host, we're kind of curious about this, we're curious about this. They rolled out Instant Book, they rolled out Superhost, all these things. And then and I was one of the few employees who was like an active and quite passionate host. So I would test all these things, and I loved it way better than accounting. So I would constantly be saying yes for all these different experiments, which they still do nowadays.
That's awesome. I got a question for you. And being a former employee, did you see the interview with Brian Chesky on uh what is it? Diary of a CEO, the podcast?
I did. I watched the whole thing recently.
Nice. So I'm just curious, he talked a ton about culture. And this isn't exactly where we were going with the podcast, but now it's kind of coming to me. I'm always curious when a CEO goes out on a podcast and speaks publicly, if that matches with what the the actual culture or the actual employees think. So when you heard that podcast, and not to put you on the hot stove, but
Yeah.
or the hot seat, but what was the culture like when you were working there?
The culture was very much, if anyone is familiar with that show, Silicon Valley, it's a comedy
Yeah. Oh,
on,
I
I think,
love that show.
Netflix.
I love that show.
It was kind of like that, where
That's
it was
awesome.
it was an open office. There was free beer on tap all day long. There was free food and snacks. There was
That's
massages,
awesome.
bike tune-ups. The CEO Brian would sit in different departments every now and then. So he went to finance for a few months and sat directly in the finance department. So that helped with the culture. The culture changed a lot when. So he would say that a lot
Mhm.
about the culture. Don't fuck up the culture is a famous quote by somebody in the Silicon Valley. And when the company and they did a lot of stuff for that. So there was what I liked, the job I had just prior to that.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't know what we sold. Like it was something technology, but I was like, I'm an employee here, but I'm like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Airbnb, they had meetings every other Friday, I think, for the whole company. It was mostly San Francisco at that time, and they would talk about what are we doing in the company, and I thought that was great. And then there'd be individual meetings as well with your department. There was much more communication. When the company moved from like one floor to two floors to three floors to seven floors, that's
Right.
really when the culture changes. When it went from one floor up, you didn't see everyone much less. It just felt more like a company. But they did a pretty good job, I think, of maintaining a preference on culture.
Yeah. Cool. What do you think about all the changes when Airbnb, became heavily guest friendly right after COVID, right? COVID hit and we saw all these cancellations hit. A lot of hosts were pissed off because they were like, I wasn't part of that decision. That's my guest. I'm hosting that person. You don't make that decision for me, Airbnb. And ever since then, right, we've seen whether it's claims or guests complaining about things, the virtual assistants, the customer service reps really have just gone heavy on taking Airbnb or taking the guest side. Do you think that's good for Airbnb? Do you think that that's potentially harmful? Do you think it doesn't really matter? Where do you stand on all that?
It's an interesting question for me because I am a guest and I am a host. I'm almost more a
Hmm.
guest than I am a host.
Sure.
And I think that so Airbnb has a moat around them, a rather large moat, unlike Uber, who they were compared to a lot in the past. Uber and
Hmm.
Airbnb aren't, they're somewhat similar, but in this case, they're not. Whereas Uber's supply and demand, in this case, the driver and the rider, are in the same city. And that's why in every city around the country, there's typically Uber Plus, the local Uber competitor. It's very easy to market and grow one market. Airbnb doesn't have that. So
Sure.
that's why I would encourage your listeners to go and look up the startup story of Brian. It's like a true startup story. There's a like you could the Instagram startup stories, like those guys became billionaires in a year. It was just a perfect market fit at the right time.
Right.
Brian and the three of them, theirs is like a real startup story where they almost failed a few times. They got the cereals going, Obama's and Captain McCain's is something like that. Um, so I kind of lost my train of thought.
That's okay. We were talking about, is it fair or is it a good thing that Airbnb has become more guest friendly?
Yes, yeah. So I think that because of the moat, they are able to become more guest friendly. But it's hard to say. But I think they may have taken it to an extreme because, especially what they did with COVID, in the public eye at the time, yeah, it was seen as a good thing. But their owners, their hosts, who they say are their partners, who are not at all their partners. Every
Right.
owner knows that. Every Airbnb host knows that now. There's a huge direct booking movement, and
Yep.
that's the source. That was the source of it. And Airbnb, it's totally off their radar. And I think that Airbnb has created the market. I think there's a competitor who could come up and blow them out of the water. It would be hard, but it's very much possible now. In 2015, 16, 17, impossible. People tried, impossible. I think that the platform is stagnant. I have a lot of complaints about the platform. VRBO rolled out a guest like frequent program.
Sure. Like
My
frequent flyer
read
mile kind of thing.
Yeah, my read on the situation, I hope, this is me being hopeful, is that Brian got successful. So when I was there, I felt he was an extraordinarily strong CEO, a new
Hmm.
CEO, but he took it. He was clearly very focused on that. My read is he kind of got lazy over the years. You can see with the website, it's not functional, especially from a designer perspective. There's a lot of weird clicks going on. And then COVID happened, and he went back into work for
Right.
work, and he couldn't really improve the platform. It was just trying to keep up. Okay, and then that happened. Then he relaxed. Okay, he went back to his old mode, and I'm hopeful for now that he's relaxed for a year or so. He's going back into it to improve the platform, of which there are lots of improvements to be made. But in general, from the guest side and the host side, um, the platform hasn't improved in years.
Hmm. I That's really interesting perspective, especially given how many, they always have the winter release, they have the
Hmm.
summer release, and there's all these things, and
Yeah,
I think a lot of them get hyped, right, a little bit more than the actual result, and
yeah.
the 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 response on at least a host side is kind of like, okay, well, that wasn't as big as we thought.
So let me give you an example of that. That's a great thing you brought up. Brian also goes on Twitter and says, "Hey, what should we do?"
Hmm.
And one of the features they rolled out was you can have two stays. So if you have dates, they'll show
Right.
you a house for 7 days
Two
and a
different
house
ones.
for
Yeah.
another 8 days. Yeah, and everyone thought that was great. Um, and I reached out to people. I was like, "Why do you think that's great?" And it turns out I found the girl who suggested this on
Hmm.
her because she posted something. She said one of those posts like how it went, how it's going, or how it's going, how it went, something like that. She said like how it's going. She made the suggestion to Brian on his Twitter feed, and then how it went, this feature. And I responded to her and I say, hey, you're aware that like these two houses are connected. You're not going to get a discount or anything. You're just moving houses in between stays. And she was like,
And
oh,
different hosts.
yeah, literally, she was like, "Oh, well, then it's useless."
Yeah.
And so that is in fact useless. The categories up top, nice feature, and it looks nice. not used, useless
Yeah.
feature. No one's booking Airbnbs with that.
I you know, and this is a little bit different than where we were going to go, but I do have a question to bring it back to your book. But I'm this is a conversation I feel like is a lot easier to have with, yes, profitable properties. We are going to be talking about that, guys. This is a really interesting conversation. Given I know you're a tech guy. I know that you worked with Airbnb, and this is stuff that personally, I think a lot of people are complaining about. I think when it comes to like, hey, we're going to have all these big changes. And then the big changes are we just added 10 more unique stays. It's like, how does that actually help me? And I know a few coaches out there like that are like, okay, now it's your job to go and find one of those unique stays. Yeah, but I don't really have a UFO that I can just put in my backyard and start renting it out. I don't have, a clay house or a contractor that can make a clay house or a contractor that can make a tree house just out of thin air, right? And so I think a lot of it just becomes, I just saw the other day a Winnie the Pooh house. That's cool, but 99.999% of us are not going to be able to do that. I want to see the stuff that's going to help the masses. That's me personally.
Yeah. After this call, I'm going to my host of this Airbnb is opening a Barbie house here not too far away, and he's having a grand opening. So I'm going to go check. I'm going to go check that out. Airbnb loves it. They love these homes.
Yeah. I guess my question on that, sorry to go off on a tangent there and share my opinion, but my question on that is, your book, right? Profitable Properties. Last time that you had a book, it was optimize your Airbnb. It was very focused on how to optimize the listing, right? Now, there you go. Now your new book is a little bit more about, hey, how to not just rely on Airbnb, but let's start looking at direct booking. Let's look at how to price it properly. Let's look at maybe some ways that we don't have to focus as much on this. Without taking the words out of your mouth, that is a little bit more of where this new book is being directed, right? And then I've got a follow-up question on that.
Yeah. And by the way, let's just be clear. I am Airbnb's like most passionate believer, but also biggest critic. So I talk, and my personality is generally like more negative based. So I like pick at the criticisms more. But Airbnb is still a place where you could go and you can list a place and make a lot of money, rather passively. So I just want to clear that up. I'm still very much a proponent of Airbnb.
100%. I think we're all on that boat. I think where I want to just ask is really, I mean, is Airbnb potentially shooting themselves in the foot for the long run by making some of these changes that are a little bit more guest friendly and pushing hosts to have to focus more on insurance bookings and, and nurses and direct bookings because they feel the pressure of like Airbnb is not my partner like they say that they are. I guess that's kind of where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I do believe they shot themselves in the foot with the COVID decision they made. They shot themselves in the foot by not making the average everyday host doesn't have great things to say about Airbnb typically. Mm-hmm. And there's a huge direct booking movement totally off the radar to Airbnb. In fact, the last time Brian was asked about this publicly, he's like, that's not really a threat to us. It's like, are you crazy?
Yikes.
And the reason why is because he's disassociated with Airbnb. He's not a user. No one in the company is a user. This is my theory at this point. I don't think anyone in the company is really using the platform anywhere. That's why we're not seeing any good changes. And so I am of their platform. I might be the number one guest in the entire world in terms of how many stays I've had on that platform. I've been living in Airbnb for 8 years. I'm also a prior employee and a very active host. I have a YouTube and all that. Now, I also know other people who stay on Airbnbs a lot as guests, not so much as hosts, but as guests. And I've asked them all. I know a few of them, quite a few. And Airbnb has never reached out to these power users. Every company reaches out to your power users. Kyle, you reach out to your customers who are using you a lot. I reached out to my customers who are using me a lot to get feedback. But Airbnb is not reaching out to their power users to get some feedback on, hey, you might want to change this, like small little changes that have big impacts. You can't search a balcony on Airbnb as a guest. That's you could search like some crazy stuff like what's the make of the oven, but you can't search a balcony, or a view. I want a view. I can't search houses with a view. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and same thing goes for the host too, right? If you feel like they are your partners, then why are we not asking the host what they, and there might be a few
Mhm.
hosts, but I know for certain that every single major host that has, I don't know how many properties it ends up taking, but when we hit about 30 properties, we were assigned a case manager. Well, that case manager, their number one job should be how can we do better, right? But when we have conversations with those case managers, it's typically, hey, here's how you performed for the last quarter, and here's the trends that we're seeing. Okay, that's
Hmm.
great, but what about hearing straight from the person that's making you guys money and how you can help give them resources? I'm sure you probably do this in your business, right? You go to the people, not just your customers, you go to the people that are cleaning. How can I help make your job easier as a cleaner? Is there any things I can provide? Is there any sort of guidance that I can give you? And by doing that, right, we create loyalty and we create them doing a better job typically. And for that reason, you would think that Airbnb would do the same. And so I think all of this comes down to, I really am excited to hear from you, a former Airbnb employee, that there's the same frustrations and that we're on the same page. We love Airbnb. I wouldn't have an amazing income if it wasn't for this amazing platform. But there's this movement of people that are doing direct bookings, and you're even moving into that space. When you see someone like yourself, Danny, that has completely built most of their business about how to optimize an Airbnb listing, and now is moving towards, hey, how do you get more bookings off Airbnb, not relying on that. I think that's when Airbnb needs to realize, like, hey, we should probably bring our attention back to this.
Yeah, the thing that pushed me the most down the direct booking platform was a specific guest
Let's
who
hear it.
stayed in my house here in Medellin, and um, so they asked for this is just a great story on so many levels. Sorry to pat myself on the back, but
No, I can't wait to hear it.
yeah. So you don't have to imagine you're a host, because you are, and I'm sure most of your listeners are. You get an inquiry from a guest, and the guest says, ask for a discount right away. First question. And I say, you not giving discounts is fine if you need to, if you're in slow season, but my house is very popular. And I said, I'm not offering discounts for these days. I have a message where I say, like, if you want to wait to 7 days before, I'll give you a discount, just to kind of say no in a not nice way. But then they went ahead and booked anyways. I don't have instant book on, so they did a request. I knew I
Mhm.
didn't want to host these guests, and you've had guests who you're like, I'd rather not. I just have a bad feeling about them. I know these dates would get booked anyways. I'd rather not host them. But we don't really have that option. Airbnb is very heavily uh, weighted in terms of search rank on accepting 100%
Sure,
of bookings, not
sure.
90%, 100% of bookings, because you're compared to your competition. So I had to accept them, basically, because there's no reason not to. I just had a feeling like they're probably going to be bad guests. So they checked in, and I have a concierge here who's fluent in English, and they did some rides and whatnot, and they got a ride to the airport at the end. So they didn't pay for one of the trips, and they said, hey, we'll get you tomorrow on the ride to the airport. We'll pay you. And so that's fine. You pay us tomorrow. So they get a ride to the airport, and they get to the airport, and they tell the driver, who tried to collect the money. He's like, "Oh no, we already paid. We're good with the trip, and like, the car ride too. Someone said it's free. So somehow they finagled their way, and they didn't pay anything. They left. And my concierge is like, "Hey, what is going on? I think they're like trying to steal from us and something." And this is just when I'm arriving. So I hear that, and I'm like, "Well, like, I don't know. That's not my uh, area of expertise. What happened? You didn't collect the money. Like, did it not pay?" And so sure enough, they didn't pay. They didn't pay. And for concierge here, so that the airport ride was like 250 Colombian pesos. That's like $40. The minimum wage here, which works different than in the U.S. Like most people kind of earn around the minimum wage. It's about 1 million pesos. So it's not insignificant money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and also the trip the other day was like another 500,000 pesos, $150, a lot of
Wow.
money for a
Yeah,
concierge and a driver.
absolutely.
So I was like, look, man, try and get the money. They didn't get the money. I ended up paying out of my pocket, and then I get to the Airbnb, and they drank. I give drinks. I sell drinks in the fridge. I used to. I don't do that anymore. I sell drinks in the fridge. I also have snacks. I also have those little ice cream, like small ice cream things in the fridge. Ice cubes, like nice ice cubes, all this stuff. These guests ate all the snacks, ate all the ice cream,
Didn't pay
and
for anything.
drank all the drinks. And when my cleaner said how much it cost, it was like $102 or something. They're like, "Oh no, that's too expensive." They gave her like $18. And then on top of that, they said they're like "Hey," they're like, "Just keep this money. You don't have to tell the owner."
Oh gosh.
Imagine the feeling. Like the feeling I had was just like of absolute disgust. Like, who are they to do any of that? Like, they didn't even pay for the replacement cost, first of all. So, so now where I'm at? Okay, do I go and do I submit a claim and try and get $102 and the extra $100, or do I get the good review? I need the good review. As a host, I need the good review. Otherwise, it's going to be, and on Airbnb, I can't just get the money. I have to submit a claim, and then there's back and forth. There's more time wasted. Airbnb takes the guest side. I have to submit proof and all this stuff. So I didn't submit a claim or anything going for the good review. Which, when it's all said and done, my cleaner also said, she asked, I do daily cleaning, by the way, and daily breakfast. She asked at the end, and these were Jewish guests. So she made them a specific meal that is with their diet plans.
Okay.
So
Kosher.
she kosher. Yeah. She went out of the way and did that. They not that they have to, but they didn't give her a tip, no tip. Most guests give a tip. And also the cleaner asked them at the end, "Hey, like, how did you go? How was it? Would you stay?" And they're like, "Yeah, it was fine, but it was not a good value. We wouldn't come back."
So they stole the value that they felt like was missing,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. And I gave them a free ride from the airport to the house. And so then
Mm.
so it's just like, this is how hosts feel. Like, my hands are totally tied when I'm
Yep.
on the platform.
Yep.
But when I'm not on the platform, I can collect the security deposit. I don't have, Google doesn't, I have reviews on Google, but Google having a 5-star doesn't really matter. You're expected to have some negative reviews, which I think is a negative on Airbnb's part.
Yeah.
It's a 5.0 or bust. A 4.5 shouldn't be like a terrible, terrible hands-off, never in a million years listing. That shouldn't
Yep.
be the case. It should be
Yeah.
a decent listing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing I take away from that too is you wouldn't have ever had to actually host them because you got that bad feeling right from the
Yep,
get-go.
that too.
Yeah.
That too.
I think where my head goes on that too is, we've had to get a lot more like, do we go for the claim or do we go for the review? Because it used to be really easy to get reviews removed. Now getting reviews removed is incredibly difficult. So that becomes even more of a hand-tied thing. So what I really want to focus on, Tiffany says, all due respect, it seems like we all need to streamline the process. So yeah, I mean, everything with like streamlining our processes, I think, is the biggest difficulty, right? Like doing that, whether it's on Airbnb or doing it on a direct booking platform, I think is where each of us has our own systems. But when you talk about your book, right, the profitable properties, I'd love to know, especially from a direct booking side, how are you now recommending people do that and actually develop their business without having to, worry about a platform marketing for them like Airbnb or VRBO?
Yeah. So I held up the cover earlier because I'm very proud of this cover. You wouldn't believe how much time it took me agonizing over this cover. And I just want to mention a video that for this book, I started recording behind the scenes clips of me while I was writing the book. I started in Brazil. I went to Colombia. I went to Dominican Republic. I was in the USA. I was in Canada. And so that video will be coming out soon about all of kind of a behind the scenes thing if people are interested. And there are tears in that tears of joy at one point in that behind the scenes. In regards to direct booking, the book has 8 parts. Part 6 is all about direct bookings, which is different from Optimize Your B&B. Part 5 is about pricing. And the biggest thing, there's a lot of people doing direct bookings nowadays, a lot of services selling direct bookings nowadays, and a lot of companies offering nice looking websites. And that's great. You probably need that if you want to do direct bookings. But the difficult part, like, it can almost be another full-time job doing direct bookings, which isn't really what I want. So what I teach in the book is at this point, I have 2 years. By the time I wrote the book, it was a year and a half. And so I talk about, well, what are the easiest ways to get
Mm-hmm.
direct bookings? Like, I'm not going on Facebook and Reddit and making posts and posting content 3 times a week and making videos and doing blog posts. I'm just not doing that. Because I get, so what can I do? So there's a lot of things you can do, but I talk about all the different things. Okay, you could do Google, you could do paid ads, you could do SEO, you could do all I have maybe 11 chapters with different things. You could do remarketing and all this stuff. But what is actually going to help a lot? And it depends on who you are. So I have a list of things that might be easy to do. For me, the thing that brought me the most direct reservations was reaching out to clinics here who do, like, there's a stem cell clinic here that's really well known. So who are my customers? They're high-end customers. This stem cell clinic is not cheap, $20,000, $30,000 treatment. So I have a connection with them where if the guest doesn't want to stay in the hotel, they can sometimes refer them to me. I've also reached out to not property managers, real estate agents who have referred me a bunch of
Yep.
traffic as well. And by the way, key point is I'm not just reaching out and saying, hey, can you do me a favor? I'm offering money in exchange. I'm saying, hey, I'll pay you to do this. If you
Yeah.
just say, hey, can you do me a favor? That's not really going to work unless you have a personal connection with someone.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the key things that I heard there, businesses that are bringing in a lot of people from out of town, and especially realtors are such a great way to do that. Amanda Williams talks about that. She's the traveling realtor. She talks about that a lot. And
Yep.
what's great about that, right, is you could also, if you're a realtor yourself, potentially even streamline that into referral fees and things of that nature. So, okay, cool. So what else is in the book that people need to know about? I heard pricing, I heard direct booking, optimizing your listings. What else should people know about in the book?
The other big change. So part 8 is a short part, but I have the top 13, I think 13 or 14 ranking factors on Airbnb.
Cool.
In order. So people like that. I also have in part 2, it is, and by the way, just to go a little bit more on that, the number one factor on Airbnb is not review rating that some people think it is. It's the number of reviews you have. Because if you have 10 reviews and you're 5.0, you might be a 4.5 when you have 100 reviews.
Yep.
Airbnb prefers a 4.9 at 100 rather than a 5.0 at 10. Okay, so that's in part 8. Part 2 is vacation rental market analysis, which I go through my process. Everyone has their own process. I go through my process and how I evaluated not only a foreign market, but also I don't really focus on the foreign market because people, for some reason, aren't that interested in that, although I recommend a lot of people have a look because the returns are outsized. I talk about how to identify a profitable neighborhood, and what I think I'm known for is a profitable micro neighborhood, which is the most important in the process. And if you do that right, then everything else is kind of easier. If you get the market right, then the reservations are easier in the long term.
I love it. Let's go back to the top 13 or 14 things that Airbnb ranks. We all hear about photos and price and everything. What's maybe one or two things that are on that list that are surprising when you share that with people? And I didn't think about that. What are one or two?
The most surprising, maybe the map location. I have as ranked number 4. So your Airbnb, there's 13 Zooms you can do to come in. So put yourself in the guest shoes and go on Airbnb and figure out where they might be zooming and what Airbnbs is Airbnb showing to the guest at each point of the process, when they just look at the city, then when they do bedrooms and all this stuff. So if you have like a destination, I hear there's a famous park, and I'm right next to that park, so I'm good. But if I was a host who is just outside that, so the zooming on Airbnb Maps is fixed on desktop. On mobile, it's not fixed. So there's fixed 13 fixed zooms. So you're either in or you're out. So at one zoom, you're going to be in. At the next, you're going to be out. So I would look on the map and I would move. And on Airbnb, you can move your pin anywhere you want. Now, I wouldn't be aggressive with it, not too much, because then it's a bad guest experience. But if you're in one zoom and out of another, and you just have to move a few blocks, then I would do that to make sure you're still in that Zoom as much as you can be. Another one would be wish list saves.
Yes.
Which is, to this day, people, I tell hosts about it, existing hosts who have hundreds of reviews, dozens of properties, and they don't even know oftentimes what a wish list saves is, which is kind of strange to me. Well, I guess not, because you would only know what that is more so if you're a guest going on and saving listings.
Sure.
But this is one of the only things that Airbnb has said improves directly your search rank. And so getting more of those is better. And you could see in your dashboard, your insights dashboard, how do you compare to your competition? That's not always so relevant because we don't know what Airbnb considers my competition. But in some things like this, I'm very interested to see, am I getting more wish list saves than my competition? I'm getting 8, my competition is getting 3. That means I am doing good in my listing. My listing looks better in Airbnb. And so it's kind of the circle of life. I'm getting more wish list saves. I'm getting shown more. I'm getting more wish list saves because I'm getting shown more.
Cool. Okay, guys. So there's 2 books out there. One is Optimize Your Airbnb. The other one is Profitable Properties. Before you tell us where we can get both of those books, Danny, we do have some questions that are in our 6-figure formula group right now that we're going to go ahead and keep you on and ask afterward. But guys, if you are here live right now, make sure to ask your questions. If you're not here live, well, you know what to do. Go check it out at fearlesscow.com/6ff. So Danny, where can people get these books and follow your content more?
I think, okay, so where can they get my books? They could get them on, the audiobook just came out last month. That's on Audible. Amazon is where most people get them. I publish through a publisher who makes it available all over the world and on different, whatever your famous or your known book platform is in your country. It's probably available there. It's also available on my website in digital and audio form. You could get a deal there I sell them both for $15. Nice. If you want to support the author directly, you can do that.
Perfect. And that website is?
OptimizeMyAirbnb.com.
Is it Airbnb or BNB?
Both. I got both those
cool.
URLs. Yeah, they're both forward. Okay. The same one.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. OptimizeMyAirbnb.com. Perfect. All right. So once again, go get everything at OptimizeMyAirbnb.com. And hopefully you enjoyed that conversation because like I said, it went in a couple directions I wasn't expecting to, but I really was curious. I just want to know, is Brian Chesky, is Airbnb's culture exactly what they say? And, it was really cool to see that a former Airbnb employee is also going through some of the same stuff that we all go through, which is we just want Airbnb to be a partner, right? And that's all that this comes down to, guys, is that Airbnb has created a really great opportunity for all of us to create income that we would not have that opportunity to. But at the end of the day, when you have an opportunity to partner with the people that are making you money, you got to take it. So Airbnb, call to you guys, partner with your hosts, listen to your hosts, get your case managers, your market managers to sit down and ask hosts the important questions that will matter for how your guests book, who books, how they're making money. That to me is the biggest thing that's missing right now. Aside from me just quitting and going and starting to work at Airbnb, I don't know how else that happens without Airbnb really starting to initiate those conversations with us. If you feel the same way, I want to hear it. Go ahead and comment down below on this YouTube video. If you're listening on the podcast, leave a review, share your thoughts as well. But, this was kind of cool to have this conversation and kind of share a few things that hopefully will get Airbnb to reach out to more hosts. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. We're helping you to conquer the world of short-term rentals. See you next time.